And good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Futsal868 Corner Talks. My name is Geoffrey Edwards, series moderator and president of the Futsal868 of Trinidad and Tobago. Futsal868 Corner Talks is an online meetup series where global sporting professionals share their experiences and perspectives on the fastest growing indoor sport in the world, futsal. In recent sessions, we expanded to discuss topics of social issues and their relation to sport. Our main objective is to sensitize and educate sports stakeholders on the sport of futsal and other pressing local and global issues. Today, in episode 21 of Futsal868 Corner Talks, we speak to part 3 of the topic Racial Inequality and Social Justice in Sport. It's very interesting that I took off the TV 10 minutes ago because CBS was having a series of documentaries highlighting persons of color in sport and their fight. They looked at tennis players Arthur Ashe and Althea Gibson, as well as the Black 14 young men who were playing for University of Wyoming, and they were expelled or banned from school because of their stance. It's very interesting that we continue to have this discussion as regards to racial inequality and social justice, noting that, as I said before, this is part 3. I just want to take a quick moment before I introduce my guest to recap by showing you all graphics of the first 2 episodes that we had. On the 14th of June, we had Mr. Brian Lewis, President of the Trinidad Tobago Olympic Committee, Ken McCoo, Director at Racism Against Sport Ireland, Mr. Kenwin Jones, former captain of the Trinidad Tobago national football team, and also English Premier League standout, and influencer Kevin Lewis. 2 weeks later, we had the Lord Mayor of Bristol, former Lord Mayor of Bristol, Councillor Cleo Lake, Shabaka Cambon of the Crossroads Foundation Project, and the TNT Chess Foundation President, Mrs. Sonja Johnson. So now we had part 3. Why? And to join me to answer this question, I have been blessed to have with us on this show FIFA Master Alumni family members, Ms. Kiomari López, Director of Club Licensing at Puerto Rican Football Federation and FIFA Master Alumni 2017, and Ms. Neikelle Moore, Director of Sports Investment at Emerson Collective and FIFA Master Alumni as well. Ladies, good day. Good day. It is a pleasure to have you all. As we know that one of our guests, our members, our family members is not here with us, but we wish you all of God's richest blessings to whatever is on your side. And we know that he will continue to watch over you and your family, Eden. So thank you very much for your love and your support as regards to this. So we want to go straight into it, ladies. But before we introduce you all, I really want to take the time, and our team did not edit this. And there was a reason we did not edit this. This is something that we did since our first part of this engaging topic. Let's take a quick look. I would love to know, ladies, is racial inequality a joke? And the reason I'm asking that question, as my first question, is from that video, and since our last conversation as a family to the CIS network, what has changed? Nikki.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me on the program today. Well, to answer your question, racial inequality is not a joke, has never been a joke, and it has carried a lot of weight through history, both on and off sports pitches. So direct and to the point, it's not a joke. It is a very slow walk at times, and it is a very difficult and heavy process in ways that are hard to understand and hard to fathom at times. And then also in very linear ways, it's very easy to understand why it continues to persist. And also for those same reasons, why it should not be as difficult to dismantle, especially in some of our areas and fields, as it is currently purported to be. So I look forward to the discussion today because I think among the three of us, we are well aware that racial inequality is not a joke, not a game, and is certainly part of many of our industries in the countries that we live in the markets that we serve, and especially for the people and the stakeholders that are part of it. In my case, and especially in the U.S., in fact, the central product is provided by Black people in many cases. So, and frankly, when I think about all of our leagues in the U.S., by many people across different races, whether that's Black, Latino, as well. So look forward to having the discussion today. And really and truly, it's not a joke. So I'm very glad that you're having the program and the conversation for as many times as needed in order for the needle to move and for the switch to click on.
It's persons like you, Nikki, who have really assisted me or helped me to keep the faith. And I want to say thank you for you to that. And I'll be continuously thanking you during this conversation and even afterwards. Kio,
hello.
On your end, what answer that question for us? You tell us what's happening in your neck of the woods as regards to inequality and is it a joke to you on your side of the world?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me again. I'm honored to be joining you guys in this panel. First of all, I don't think it's a joke. We're talking about lives. People are dying. And when it comes to human beings and lives, that is definitely not a joke. I think things have changed, but they haven't changed enough. And when you put it into perspective, there needs to be a lot more change. Like there's barely been any change. And I think a lot needs to be done because there's a disregard for human lives. And I think when you don't respect lives and human and being able to just live, this is not a joke. And I think that we need to keep having these conversations. We need to make sure that we are calling upon people to continue having these conversations. And then we need to also act upon these conversations because I think something that I'm sure we'll discuss later is that there needs to be accountability here. And again, it's not a joke and I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to our chat.
I'm getting a little bit of shivers because I'm not going to be moderator here. I'm actually going to be talking with you all. This is our conversation. This is us together as one. And it's important to me as well, representing an organization such as Futsal868 of Trinidad and Tobago. We just came out of a general election and we saw the racial divide that was attempted or perpetuated by leaders, political leaders. And the interesting thing from a Trinidad and Tobago perspective, a Caribbean perspective, is that it was done by persons of color. Yeah. And some persons might be listening from international and be like, oh, that happens. Yes, it happens here and all. And So to be able to have all three different perspectives is very interesting. I really want us to continue to have the conversation as regards to how do we solve it. And Kio, there's something that you mentioned in terms of action and accountability, and you mentioned it, but it actually started with Nikki when we had our technical discussions. And Nikki, I want to go straight to you as regards to that concept of action and accountability. Tell us more.
Yeah, I think everyone has been in a very strong listening mode, very willing to hear information coming towards them and coming at them. And it's a passive approach. And, you know, from a assessing of a problem and acting on a problem, you can understand it. However, most of us also understand what urgency, what timelines look like, what building the plane as you fly it looks like. And there is urgency here that requires more than just listening, but also acting. And at every stage of this, and I think in any part of a discussion, you can have a question of what is happening and what is the ask. But the asks have now been made, and they will continue to be made because this is not a single excavation of an issue. There's a lot that is buried in racial inequality. And a lot of times the people that are fighting for that equality do not know, in fact, where the bones are buried, where the system actually moves and where the levers turn. And so in uncovering that and in asking for it, it's also incumbent on the rest of us in positions to either find out those informations, the gap of information between the what and the how, to step in and say, okay, here's how we get to those answers. And frankly, also to act on it as we do it. We're not always going to get it right. We shouldn't feel as though we're not allowed to pivot, because much like everything else, if you go into something earnestly with an intent to, whether it's to expand and make it better or to solve an issue, and you go into that with good faith, you find that you have to make those turns. And I find a lot of times that the listening mode seems to be a very nice continued cop-out for actual action. And I think we're beyond those stages now. We have long been listening and acting simultaneously. I think we've gathered enough information and built enough lines of trust and direction to be able to act. I mean, there are certainly specific examples. I know that at some point today we'll probably talk about the strikes of the last week, or I guess the week before, here in the US. And there are specific actions where you can point to where there's a clearly defined what, but it's also incumbent on everyone to participate in the how, especially when in fact you know where a specific tool to achieve the what and the goal that we're asking for exists.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I'm very much proud of the Trinidad Tobago Olympic Committee's president, Mr. Brian Lewis, who has in the last few months been louder, and I use the word louder because he was always loud as regards to his stance when it comes to racial inequality, and more so to speak to the IOC as regards to getting rid of Rule 50, which addresses or tells persons that they are not allowed to demonstrate on any social matter at the Olympic movement. And as again, I would say he has been a mentor to many of us young sporting administrators in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean as regards to how he can stand up to that. Kio, as regards to the Latin American or the Latino community, tell us, how does accountability work, and what is your biggest problem at the moment when it comes to Latin American community, who are doing extremely well and have continued to do extremely well in sports such as baseball and football/soccer in the United States of America?
Yeah, it's funny. The other day we were talking about it, and I was mentioning it to my sister, and we were talking about the Black Lives Movement and all these things that are happening. And I was explaining that I feel like, in a sense, people have forgotten about the Latinos and the issues they face, especially in the U.S. and when they're immigrants. And my sister was like, but right now what's happening is Black Lives Matter. And I was like, I completely understand, but I also want to highlight that we can't forget about the Latinos and the power that we would actually have if we all united and fought against it. But yes, I think that at least I was researching before today, and I was looking up what movements there are in MLB and MLS trying to change Latino. How are they being accountable? And although I found a few campaigns, I was like, that's great. There's campaigns everywhere, say no to racism, discrimination, and all that. But what are you actually doing with those campaigns? Are people talking about it? Are famous people or famous athletes going forward and trying to do the things that people like LeBron James are trying to do? I feel like there needs to be more happening, especially when there's elections now. And most of these people, especially immigrants, they're undocumented and they can't vote. So where's their voice? And I'm so scared that we're losing our voice and that we need to step up, especially in the administrative side of sports as well. Where are the Latinos? Why are we not fighting as well? And I feel that the importance of the Black Lives Matter movement is that we all, doesn't matter what color you are or whatever it is, we all have to fight and we have to do more. There's just, I think there's just more needs to be done everywhere in the industry. And I'm just afraid that it's not enough. And what can we do? What else can we do? Because we can't give up at this moment. And I really would like to promote those conversations as well.
Neikelle, allow me the opportunity to stick with Kio for a little bit, because I want to learn more as regards to our Latino family members and how we could be able to support you. And Kio, I have the sense that, and even since Thursday, I have the sense that was just an introduction. That was just a tip of the iceberg. I think that you have more to say, and I want to hear you speak more to it. So give us more, tell us more, give us, as we say in Trinidad Tobago, take it off your chest, girl. Take it off your chest.
That's fair. It's just frustrating to see, at least on a personal level, I have so many Latino friends that I studied in the US and they went there with me and they're just struggling to stay in the country. They're struggling to bring their families here. They're struggling to go visit their families. They don't have the visas. They don't have a voice. And then all you hear are jokes here, jokes there. I know, especially I've been working in the industry for almost 10 years now. And it's just the constant jokes about like, oh, you're an immigrant or you jumped over the wall and all these jokes. And I was like, first of all, I'm Puerto Rican. I have a passport and it doesn't matter. Even if I didn't, I don't think you have the right to be treating people like that. And I was even researching and I saw this game where there was this high school game somewhere in the US and they were screaming at all those kids, like build a wall and all of that. How is it possible that these things are happening? And why is it okay? Why are we seeing so many videos of people telling others to learn English or to go back to their countries? I can't believe we live in the world where that is okay. And the main issue is that people are not being educated. And I feel like these athletes could create a portal, could create a platform where they could just talk about it and fight and try to figure out a way to just educate people. And just, we're humans. How do you think you have the right to treat someone else like that? That just baffles me. The same way it baffles me when you're Black or Latino or Asian and you come into the industry and you have to gain respect and you feel like you have to prove yourself over and over again compared to someone who's maybe white or Caucasian and they just get all the respect they need because English is their first language and because they grew up in a maybe easier world than we did. And I just think this is mad and more needs to be done, basically. I don't know what you guys think.
We totally agree with you. So one more question I have to ask you as regards to that. Where are the Latin stars? Where are they? I'm asking you, where are they? And also, you are part of the Puerto Rican Football Federation. Are they doing anything to speak up or speak to this matter in terms of what you are addressing here?
I think, first of all, where are the athletes? That's what I'm trying to see. Where are the people standing up? One of the things that I saw, at least with the Black Lives Matter and all of that, there's a lot of news reporters who are Black and they get to speak out and say what they feel and all of that. But there's not many Latin news reporters, especially in the sports sector. So who's speaking up for us? Is it just me and someone else and that's it? Like, where are those athletes, especially in the MLB and MLS, where most of them come from Dominican Republic, Venezuela, all those countries that struggle. And then they just take advantage of those athletes, bring them to the US, and they don't give them at times the same opportunities, even on a contract, they just take advantage of us. And with regards to the Federation, I think that we're not doing enough. I think that's great that the president invited me or told me to do this as well. I think it's great that he's pushing it out and trying to have these conversations. But I do agree that more needs to be done, and I'm definitely going to push so that we do more, because we Puerto Ricans have more Puerto Ricans in the U.S. than we do in Puerto Rico, and more needs to be done. And if we can help, and I think we should help, I think that would actually make things better. And we just have to keep talking, like Caribbeans, Trinidad and Tobago. We just have to push the conversation and then start doing something about it.
And yeah, so, one thing, Jeffrey, one thing. So I would say as well too, I mean, Kio, it's really interesting to hear this. And I wouldn't pretend to know what the specific issues and all of the issues are around the Latin American community. And I do mean Latin people in America, so Latinos in America. But, you know, we do know that immigration is a big one. We do know that DACA recipients, so i.e. the descendants that are of people who came from abroad, whether that was, you know, for refugee purposes or whether that was for other purposes, whether it was just the opportunity that was presented for their skills to meet a need that was existing in the United States. And it's an interesting one because what I at least hope happens from a lot of these movements, and I think what might be happening is that this is a muscle that has atrophied for a long time, where we've seen individual athletes come together to, you know, stand up against racism, especially on from Black athletes. But even in the process of this current time around COVID, it feels as though athletes are finding their levers and they're testing them out. So sometimes it might even be to the extent, by the way, it's college athletes. It's a lot of the younger athletes in sports where you typically wouldn't see it. And so what, you know, we hope would happen is that baseball players and soccer players, who unfortunately a lot of times tend to be in a different kind of negotiation position when we do not have such a captive social audience, hopefully that in them seeing others push levers, they might be identifying the levers that they have as well. And I do believe that there's something to be said as well for equipping athletes across leagues and across different spaces to fight inequality generally. I don't think that you would have a deaf ear to that. I think what ends up happening is people know their lived experience a lot of the times, but they're not able to see the comparison of their experience to another's experience until they are also educated on that lived experience. And for that, I do think there needs to be some level of coming together of the people who have leverage in their sports, which are a lot of times the people who deliver the product of the sport, i.e. the athletes. And they do not a lot of times cross to talk about those issues. But it could be something of someone saying, hey, look, you know, we are in fact the skilled workers in said industry, said business. You are in fact the skilled workers of said industry and said business. If you guys in fact care about what is happening on the populace of people who are like you, we can show you what we have tried, and hopefully you will also try the same thing. But baseball has never been, and I'm sure you guys saw this on FIFA Master as well, but baseball has never been a stranger to unionizing and activism, especially on the back of its minority representatives. So it should not be new to a baseball player that cares to be able to assemble the masses of them. And hopefully they all do have that through line of caring about the issue to then be able to push it in similar ways, using the levers that they have seen used by other leagues.
So with that, it brings me to the point of we saw 2 weeks ago NBA players boycotting. As you rightfully said, MLB has had their unified stance years ago. What do you think? Is this going to be a new precedent whereby the EPL just started? Is going to start. Sorry, is the English Premier League is going to start their season soon, within the next week or two. Do you think that if any issue or racial issue occurs on the field of play, or directly or indirectly affects the field of play in different jurisdictions and in different leagues, do you think that there will be an action similar to what the NBA players had?
I think we're gonna start seeing more of that, or at least more conversations of that. But my issue with that is don't just not play one game. I think you have to do more than that. Don't play the rest of the season if you have to. We're talking about money. These owners are going to lose a lot of money. And when it comes to money, you want to protect your money. And if it's the only way you can try to get out a statement, I think they should. I know it's not fair. Some players have a lot more money than others, and it's not fair on them and their salaries. But I think more should be done. They should have fought for more. And if not, just have a list of demands. At least if, I think it was Nikki talking about the other day, if you have to make a few phone calls and at least you show that you made an effort to try and change, then we're moving a bit further. But I think they needed to do more. I think they needed to, if it was maybe not the whole season, but a few more games, because these owners are usually the ones who have connections with lobbyists, who have connections with all the governors and presidents and political people, and they know their way around the political scene. And I think that if it will continue to happen, they should push more and just have a list of demands and not play until they comply with those demands, basically.
Yeah, I think to your question about it happening in other leagues, I think even here, I don't know that players knew that was an option for them, right? For a long time, I've never seen it done in this way. So I think, to my point of people pushing on levers, I think they're starting to see now all of the different ways. And so if other players are observing around the world, I think now that becomes within the realm of possibilities. Whether it will actually happen, I don't know, because I can't say that I know the dynamics of how those leagues work as well as I know the dynamics of our leagues. But I think once you've seen a possibility, it does become an option for you. So when I look out on the pitch, whether it's Bundesliga, whether it's the Premier League, whether it's Liga, to a degree also with La Liga and Serie A, there's enough where that could be a problem, right? Where if you really did want to put your foot down in the middle of a match, and every single person, every single black player, every player that is not white decided to walk off the pitch, that would in fact make an impact, right? To Kio's point, yes, I think you would want to have a level of demand of what you would want changed, right? But I also think it's important for those who are making the demands that also control the quality of the product, i.e. a set of players walking out. Also don't let others off the hook of knowing how to fix that problem. So if I tell you I do not want to be pelted with both physical and racial abuse, whether it's throwing bananas on the pitch, whether it's screaming racial epithets off from the stands, and I say that is what I want fixed, then that's the what. Like, it's already defined. Don't now ask me how and what would be good enough for me with that, right? So I think they also need to hold others accountable that I, the athlete, don't necessarily have to tell you exactly how this can be done. We had this conversation previously about rules and carrots and sticks, where you know what hurts, you know what causes people to change their behavior in an arena. You knew that when you made real rule changes, you knew that when you made security changes, you know what it takes. So whatever that is, I need you to adjust to the scenario of what I am asking for now in order to make that happen. And they shouldn't let administrators, team owners in our case, league owners off the hook in asking for that. And I actually believe that given the fundamental need for those players within the sphere of this business, that folks will respond, right? And I don't think people need to feel a pressure either with a problem as great as the problems that we're facing societally, whether it's racial, whether it's the freedom of movement, whether it's wealth, whether it's, all of these larger macro problems. I don't think people should feel as though they need to have the problem laid out from point A to point Z at this point. You may be asking for repeated action. You might say, this week I want this done. And something else happens that you never even saw coming 3 weeks down the way. And you say, you know what, I want this done now too. I think there is something about asking and not feeling as though you need to be negotiating against yourself in order to get something done. If we're all committed to this problem the way we're all committed to this business, then there should be a way for us to find something and a solution that works to solve the problem.
It has always bothered me that Colin Kaepernick took all of this burden on himself. And we are speaking about a unified front. Would it be hypocritical of his fellow black-colored NFL players if a situation occurred this season for all of them to walk off when they had that opportunity to do it with Colin?
I mean, I guess Colin could feel that way, but I certainly, I'll definitely say I was Team Colin way back then, right? So, which I'm sure many people, by the way, would say, right? Yeah. I would say that I don't think it would be hypocritical because people evolve and we're in a different moment right now. And I would also say what I find particularly interesting about the NFL is that when Colin did it, we all know, or anyone that's familiar with the sport knows that the center is the quarterback. And when Colin did that, he was one of few black quarterbacks at the time doing that. And yet this summer, you saw where, although the NFL did not come out with a very strong statement, call it supporting the movement for Black lives, right? Their players and rogue employees, in fact, did. And those players were, in fact, the young black top quarterbacks of the NFL. So now you're seeing this chain of response. And the other thing about that is if you then take it another step further and you see the NCAA and the athletes now standing up for themselves, whether that's COVID and health related, whether that's pay and remuneration, whether that's we would like our racial asks identified and answered, that is the next generation that's coming up in there. Yes. So now you have the young and the best athletes, the young and the most visible ones calling for this change, and you have a talent pool coming in that is doing the same thing and is willing to be active about it, especially in this period. So I would not say that it would be hypocritical. I would say it would be an evolution. For everyone else, you can sit and think for yourself about whether or not you did not stand with your brethren before. But for now, you can go ahead and make the step. The league now has to respond. It's a different negotiating position. I, for one, I understand, and frankly, I struggle to sit with the idea that Kaepernick did this and that now all of a sudden teams are willing to approve protest. That makes no sense to me. You want to approve that's not how protest works. And thank you for your magnanimity at this point. But, that ship has sailed and the demands have changed. And you have a whole generation, stacks of generations coming behind them that you might want to answer to, both within the product and within your treatment of your players as, in fact, strong and key stakeholders to the products that you serve up.
Kio, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I think the word evolve is very important here. I think, as Nikki was mentioning earlier, I think players now and companies or teams, they're starting to notice their leverage, they're starting to know their power, and they're just trying to figure out the way to better use it to help change. And I think it's the same with players. Maybe back then they didn't know they could do that, or they just didn't feel confident enough, or they weren't, I don't know. I think people change and things change. And I think that it was bad that they didn't stand up with him back then, but I think we should move forward and just start and appreciate that it's happening now. It's bad that more bad stuff needed to happen in order for it to happen. But I think moving forward, we should just try to change things and just try to let that one go, not go. But I just think people change, and they're slowly going to start standing up more and more. But I just don't think they knew they could do it as much. I don't think they felt confident enough in doing it. They were maybe scared, and that's sometimes not an excuse. But I think that we're going to start seeing more of it as the years continue on. And I'm sure this is going to be this protest and all that, they're not going to stop anytime soon. So it's just going to get more intense, or at least I hope that things do start changing.
And for sure, leverage is huge. Leverage is important. The idea that everybody is stuck in their house looking for live content is a big piece of leverage. Like at some point, we can step back from whether people truly understand and feel the weight of what racism is and why it's important, and really just step back into the basics of, hey, people need stuff to watch right now. If you, your channel, your means of distribution are going to survive, your product, your offering is going to survive, then you need that live content. And that piece of leverage is really important, because if your live content is not, call it, attractive enough for me to watch, i.e. don't even think you can do this with the Team B set of players, it's not going to happen. I'm just going to turn to Netflix. I'm just going to watch something else. So this is it's a big business point that they did not have before, where everyone is trapped, and the only form of live content right now, at least for us, is in fact sports. And actually, now that I think about it, yeah, because we don't have concerts, we don't have anything else where you can all get together and watch something as it's happening in fact that moment. So, between them and Versus, I guess they've got the market cornered.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I also want to add something that people are doing now nowadays, and that they're just calling people out. If you're not helping, if you're a player and you're not speaking up, I think now people are being called out. And I think more on a personal level or on our day-to-day jobs, that's something we need to start doing more. And it's just calling people out. Some jokes are jokes, and they've always been jokes, but you can't take them anymore. You can't say them anymore. And even in WhatsApp groups with leading industries in the sports industry, people are still saying some jokes that are not acceptable. And I think we need to start calling people out more often, and whether it be about race or discrimination or women or gender, sexism, whatever it is, I think people need to be called out. And that's something that needs to change.
As you speak about calling out, we definitely will be calling out some people after this break. Watching Futsal 868 Corner Talks, as we speak to part 3 of racial inequality and social justice in sports. Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back.
Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilonoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana, dawo yami, alikholana, buso wami, awukholana, ilondoloze.
So welcome back to Futsal 868 Corner Talks. With me is my FIFA master family, Kiomari, López, and Neikelle Moore. And for those who are watching on, if it is you recognize, you're Trinbagonians who recognize the surname Moore, yes, she has family in our beautiful sister Isle of Tobago. So, Nikki, when I get a chance, hail out your peeps. But before the break, Kio was speaking to, she was speaking out to calling out our peoples. And I'm going to start. I mean, to FIFA Master 19, I wanted to be extremely clear that you all call me Papa G. And that's for a reason. As I always tell you all, love, honor, and respect. And that's exactly what it is I will give to you all. At the same time, I've also told you all that we are agents of change. And if it is we do not speak to or speak up on this matter, what is called racial inequality, then we would not be agents of change. And those 12 months that we spent together, saying that we formed a bond, a family bond, will really be a farce. Because at the end of the day, you can't watch me as Papa G, your brother, and know that there are things that will be affecting me and mine, and don't even feel free to say, what up? Hit me up. Tell me what's up. You speak to me about everything else, including reggae music, about the food, about beautiful Caribbean island. Hit me up. Tell me what's up. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start from that personal point of view. I do not know if my guests will do the same, but to each his own. And it's also important I also throw this out to other member associations in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of our governing body, Trinidad and Tobago Football Association, and other national sporting organizations and NGBs, that we need to speak up as regards to racial inequality in Trinidad and Tobago. Because as Sizzler say, dance a yard before you dance abroad. We have to fix home first. And I'm going to call each one of you all out, because at the end of the day, we need to heal us. We need to better ourselves. If we don't take care of our home, we can't take care of anybody else's. So that's me starting it off. Nikki.
Yeah, I mean, I have an extraordinary bond with my edition. We had 28 people, 22 nationalities. And so typically when I or anyone calls or speaks, others stand up. And what I do think we're missing from our discussion, at least in the 11th edition, is the sharing of what is actually happening in the different corners of their sports world and also their geographic world. Because when I sit here, I know what affects me as a person. I know that they know what affects me as a person. And I think they also know my personality and how I might respond to things. And typically when I'm challenged in these ways, I just jump right into the fray. But I think one piece that I would definitely appreciate is that if I pull up an Al Jazeera map of all the protests that broke out after George Floyd, it tells me that this issue is really not just my own, right? And so regardless of whether or not, I mean, when I tell you there were protests worldwide, that is probably the most informative snapshot infographic map I have ever seen. Just go on the Al Jazeera site, look up the protests worldwide. And so when I see that it is in fact outside of everyone's doorstep that is in my FIFA master family, I kind of want to understand how every market is responding to it. To what degree is this in fact a thing for them? And I say that from a couple perspectives. One, I need to understand kind of personally, what does sitting back and looking at this issue feel like for them? Is it that they make that connection directly to the peers that they've met? Or has it been, oh no, those people are separate from the issue? Because I'll make one thing very clear. There's nothing that pertains to my skin color that is separate from me. So that is definitely something that, I want to hear from my peers on. More importantly, though, it's an interesting guide to how we've always had conversations. I have always gone to my FIFA master peers about whether it's a particular topic around law, around I even had a conversation about, I think it was like equine poisoning and equine rights. So I have a friend that is involved with the Federation, FPI. So I know nothing about horses, but for me, I needed to understand what it meant for a sport to look at an issue around animal rights. I had no idea that was even a thing. So right now we're talking about human rights. I kind of want to understand what is happening in everyone's neck of the woods, how they're thinking about it, really what's the critical thinking happening. And for the ones that are here or the ones that have had any connection with the US and this issue, it's really been eye-opening to now see people finally raise their hands and say, hey, look, okay, now I understand this is very serious. Like, here's what we're doing. How can I help out what you're doing? And to set up those conversations. But as of right now, I think there's certainly more that we could put our brains together on to actually make some inroads and frankly, to change the narrative. It is happening everywhere. It's France, it's Switzerland, it's Spain, it's Italy, it's Brazil. It is everywhere, whether you whether you assumed it was not, or whether you think it's something that will just fizzle out. And finally, the last thing I'd have to say about it is everyone should take notes, because this is, as I said, if it popped up on that Al Jazeera map, it means it's coming to you. So if you are in this industry and you are seeing what's happening here, it is likely going to visit you in some form or fashion within the course of the next year or within the course of the growth of your industry. And if there's discrimination in any particular place, then we know that discrimination means cutting off an entire market worth of growth, and thus probably will cut the lifeline of your sports and your sports opportunity to grow into the future.
If I may, before Keo jumps in, as regards to Nikki's point to the altitude map, let's take a quick look at what it looks like. And that is very interesting, to say the least, to show exactly how much of the world has been impacted by the fight. Keo, on to you.
Yes, going back to the FIFA master topic, in our groups there hasn't been any conversation with regards to what's happening around the world. First, I think they should be asking, what can we do to help change, even if it's within the FIFA master alumni group, or wherever it may be. My other problem is that I don't know if people are oblivious to the fact that maybe because it doesn't happen to them, it just doesn't happen. And I think that's one main problem that's going on with the FIFA master. At least people, they're like, it must be that they're like, oh, I haven't gone through any of like that, so it doesn't happen. So people are like, if it doesn't affect me, then why should I be paying attention? That's just for those who it affects. I think that's a huge problem with, especially in Europe. They're like, oh, that only happens in the US. There's only racism in the US, which is not true. And even when you're in the master, when you're trying to live in Europe as a non-European, you see all the discrimination because you don't have a visa or this or that. Our job opportunities are way less. The comments are different. So I don't know if it's that they don't think it affects them, or they just don't feel comfortable talking about it. And I think that's why we need to start calling people out. And even if we have to do huge Zoom meetings with loads of different editions and just talk about it, or even if you have to do it within your federation, within your sports industry, wherever you work, I just think people are oblivious and they're like, it doesn't affect me, why should I care? And it shouldn't be like that, because nothing will change.
I just want to make it quite clear that the FIFA Master has been the most incredible year of my life, and I think that my co-hosts would agree to that. And the FIFA Master will still remain our family. They are our family. And like all family members, we have our issues. But like all family members, we are going to solve our issues, and we are going to be the leaders of change, because we were just voted for the 8th year in a row the best sports management program in Europe and the 3rd in the world. So I'm never going to be at any point in time looking down at the FIFA Master, considering I'm the program coordinator for CIS Network in the Trinidad and Tobago. So it's just a matter of us, by example, looking internally first before we look externally. And I want all our viewers to understand that. That is what true leadership is, in us to be able to have self-reflection and change ourselves before it is we can be able to positively impact the world. And I want our FIFA Master members and family members to be able to understand that this is a call out in love, and to hope that you all can be able to understand such and be able to work with us, because we are in every sphere of the sporting landscape globally, and thus we need to continue to be able to add that to our portfolio as regards to being agents of change when it comes to this matter of racial inequality and social justice.
Well, and one other thing, I think there's, like everything else, it's the blind spots. It's the things that we can have this conversation, you, me, and Keo, all the time, and we will miss all the blind spots that we all have. And so that's the support that I'm looking for, because frankly, if I'm looking at the sports industry and I'm looking at it overall, then I know that it does not just touch my shores. It does not just sit within the borders of the United States of America. It does not just sit in this region. It does not just sit among people that look like me. And so that's the part that I believe is the most difficult to absorb. My thing is, when I ask something, I really just want the feedback as well, because it's a data point and it's a safe space for you to have that data point. At least I would hope for it to be. And if it's not, it would be really nice to know what makes it a safe space. But we have blind spots, and we should all be sitting here saying to ourselves, with every single issue that we come upon, including this one, I need to understand what these blind spots are. And I'm only going to get that level of honesty, that level of safe entry, probably through my peers that know me well enough to do that. Other than that, I would be asking somebody randomly in the industry for it? No. And I do think that that's a two-way street. Obviously, feel free to talk to us about it. Sure, no problem. But really and truly, there's a really important piece we are missing of all these people represented across so many federations, so many areas, so many nationalities, so many races. And it's as though we're almost losing the true value of what I believe the FIFA Master is supposed to be. It's a hard problem to solve, but we have so many people. What kind of creative things can we try? How many people can raise their hand and say, I tried this, it didn't work for me. Here were the dynamics of the environment that I was working with, and this is why it didn't work. Hey, really heard the message that you were saying here, but I think if we were going to get the messaging through here, this is how we would have to adjust it. Is that something that is doable, or is that in fact the message delivery that is critical for you? In fact, then how do I set up my environment to receive the message then that you're giving? There's a lot of stuff that we're not going to see speaking only amongst each other. And that's where, if I were making any appeal, because I'm very hard to make that appeal, I don't like doing it, but if I were to make any appeal, frankly, it's the blind spots. It's these things I'm never going to understand. I will not know the inner workings once it gets to a certain point. And that's where I'm hoping that eyes and ears and understanding of my desire to be part of the solution means that it's your also desire to help open up the avenues and the assistance and the understanding to be able to solve that issue. You're on mute.
Once again, Neikelle, happy that you mentioned it. I just want to be able to show that map once again as regards to the global impact and response to the George Floyd protest that happened throughout the world. So let's just take a moment to do so. It's really, really, really important that I show that over again, because we want to make persons understand that this is not just United States of America. This is not just Trinidad and Tobago. This is not just Puerto Rico. This is global. With that being said, guys, let's just take one quick break before we come back and wrap up the show as regards to solutions, because I really believe that we need to be able to give some solutions, as well as I do not want these two ladies to leave without and going into the dressing room and saying to themselves, I think I could have given a little more. So I want to take a quick break, and I want you all to gather your thoughts, because I want us coming out in that last third, giving everything. So let's take a quick break. You'll be watching Futsal 868 Corner Talks as we speak to part 3 of racial inequality and social justice. We'll be right back. I keep having to put these ladies above me, because they are, yes, in every way and possible. I see Nikki shake her head. Welcome back to the last third of Futsal 868 Corner Talk, where we are speaking racial inequality and social justice. And as I said before, this is our last third. Nikki, tell me what's on your mind. Tell me what's on your heart. Tell me what's on your chest. I mean, normally that's when a man is caught in a woman, he asks those questions. Darling, speak to me. As you know, the yardies will say, baby, speak to me. Talk to me.
Well, I guess these days I'm very focused on just the accountability angle of it, and truly understanding what effectiveness looks like as we tackle some of these things, both internally, whether that's personally and professionally, or macro. And I think the last couple of weeks have been pretty interesting, because the idea that we need to have this conversation a second time, and for now to be all of a sudden an impetus for another set of movement, tells me that there is some mapping and some accountability that we need to do. So if I take specifically a lot of the examples that we touch here, coming out of the last week, and after I understand, Kio's position, and also it's a position that is very much felt across the US, of coming out of an athlete strike, what the asks are not enough, right? And I have learned a lot through this process, understanding, one, that I guess you had to be in a bubble for a strike of work in the bubble to actually make an effect. So, okay. And then secondly, that willingness to be able to push and to partner with those, and to honestly look at your peers and your partners. So if it is players and ownership, to honestly look at your peers as players and your partners as ownership, and say, hey, what are we really getting done? And so a couple of things came out of that. There was a coalition that was formed to focus on police accountability and voter suppression. There were some specific asks around arenas and venues to make themselves places to vote. And as of late, I think in the past few days, it's come out where Miami, for example, American Airlines Arena was rejected by the mayor of Miami as a voting site. So now what is the ask that would be incumbent on Miami ownership with respect to voting? It seems as though they're in there. Their messaging says, we're not done here. We're going to find our way to be part of ensuring that voter suppression is it. And if that's the ask, then fine. I'm not going to argue with a body of grown athletes and decision makers on the asks that they have made. But it is that accountability. And I've mentioned it before. A lot of times the ask comes out, which is the what, and then there's a how. And it is not incumbent only on the people making the ask to define the how. In fact, a lot of times, if what they're saying is we are not going to set our foot back onto the playing field, onto the court, until we have our what, then it's up to all the rest of us, including whoever, to figure out how we do this. And when we have that inside information, when we have the ability to find that out, I will just reiterate that we need to try to uncover this. I've been blessed in that I feel that every chapter has its purpose. I am living in a chapter now where, before entering the space in which I work with now, I would constantly ask these questions of how could X be done? And now I turn around and I see mayors and I see former secretaries of education, of other business leaders, people who have worked in media. And I now know that there are people that I can ask that how to, and then we try and uncover, and then we need to funnel that information back. But it cannot be incumbent, and it certainly should not be incumbent on the sports industry, and especially not on athletes alone, to make any kind of change or to direct it. And as an industry, we need to come and stand behind and also be proactive, as we've seen some employees be, to make that change happen, and to kind of achieve a set of goals and objectives, as we do with everything else in this business, together, using the skills and faculties that we individually bring to the table, and also collectively as our respective sporting bodies.
It's on mute.
I know that I told you it was the last one, but I want to ask you two questions, Nikki. This September is the beginning of most football leagues, if not all football leagues globally. What advice would you give to professional players? And I use football because we have American football is going to start as well. MLB has started. Basketball is just going to wrap up. So we're going to have a full year, a full season of sports. What advice would you give to club owners, managers, directors, players, all of the stakeholders involved in sport as regards to addressing racial inequality? That is one. And secondly is you always mention what individuals of color can do right now, because I always hear you say this is our time to be able to push the envelope a little more. And in terms of go and speak to, ask questions, push some more. I would like you to be able to put it in your own words as you eloquently have done, to give that advice to persons who are listening. So one is a question and one is for you to be able to comment in your own words that I took for myself, because I myself have been doing some shameless plugs and pushing the envelope in terms of getting persons to respond who I may not have previously been able to have them to respond accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, those are big questions. I don't know that I'm in a position to advise, but I would just say that if I were in those positions, especially as athletes, and it's probably also different industries and that are away from the day-to-day life of many people. I think there's something to taking this period of time to sit back and just kind of assess what you might be missing and what questions are out there that are not answered for you. And then seeing, where all the pressure points are and why it hurts for different segments of the population, where you might be able to lend a voice to something that you can empathize with or you can sympathize with, and that you can see that the message is falling upon deaf ears when issued by others. So I think athletes have an interesting space and what they like to call a platform to do so. But I think you want to make that connection authentic and certainly be curious and want to understand what is happening beyond maybe situations that don't directly touch you, but may touch people like you and may have touched you in the past. With respect to inserting yourself in conversations as well, I would say this. I've always said that the first thing is you want to know where you stand, right? And a lot of times your questions come to, where do we stand? It might be, hey guys, have we done an audit on what our business looks like if we're looking at X, Y, and Z variable that I found in this business journal or in this social commentary that I think we would want to be representative on a scale of, right? And bringing that to the table. And sometimes it's just inserting yourself in a room because you are the blind spot. Like this is one of those things that I think play for business as well. If we're talking about this as a business, as a culture, as an industry, then you need to have your blind spots represented. And if you and of yourself represent a blind spot, then there are savvy ways to get in there. And frankly, there are not so savvy ways that should be acceptable right now because we're trying to solve a problem. So I would just say, insert yourself where you can. I've always half joked, but I'm really serious about how, I've tried to do that myself. And a lot of times you may think you don't bring an expertise that you do, when you find when you walk in the room that it's just a different way of thinking and a different experience or a different alarm bell that goes off for you that doesn't go off for other people that no one will have thought about. They may not, maybe someone thought about it and couldn't voice it, but you should feel pretty secure in your position to be able to voice something that you may see that others may not. And once you put it out on the table from a business perspective, it's a data point for them to decide. But for you, looking at a response of how people then choose to deal with the information and the feedback that you have provided should also be informative for where the gaps are and for whether or not you even want to belong or to associate with a place that may not respond to concerns that you think are heavy enough to be of concern for a business that you want to work for. So, I mean, it's a big question, and I'm always happy to discuss. But I also think it's a huge sharing. For me, coming here for a corner talk is not so much about all that I have to say, but hopefully also the feedback that I will get, and certainly the conversation with other people in the industry like you, Jeffrey, and Kio. So it's this constant world of talking, but also acting and trying and testing and pushing the limits to your comfort level, and also pushing your comfort level sometimes as well. Nobody wants to have these conversations, frankly. We don't like it for it to be solved, but that's not where we're at. And we've tackled many problems before. So I would hope that people do not look at this as though it's insurmountable, because we've done this for things before. And I bet that people who are shying away from this current issue have been front of the line on solving some of the rest, and their skills and talents could be used accordingly. Mute.
Sorry, Kio.
Yes. So first of all, I think we need to start writing down tangible what we actually want. It's great to talk about it, but what do we want? Again, all these campaigns that are happening everywhere in every sport, whoever is making them up, are they actually sitting down and being like, what do I actually want from this campaign? I don't want it to be a publicity stunt. I want this to change and this to change, and I want numbers for it. And I think that's when the tangible benefits and when you actually see change. Another really important thing that I want to highlight is education. And for that to happen, I think you need to sit down and just do a bit of like self-reflection and see what you think about things, and then ask yourself, why do you think that? Why do you make the comments you make them? And then talk about it and try to educate yourself and educate your kids. If you're a player, if you're an athlete, if you're a CEO, educate your family, because they're most likely going to be the future leaders in the industry as well. And that's one thing that I really want to highlight as well. I don't know if it's been happening or not, but I really, really want to encourage clubs and federations and teams to have an insight talk. If they have Black players, Latino players, I want them all to sit down and talk about it with their peers, with their CEO, and with everyone. And when you see something wrong, you call them out and you explain to them why it is wrong. And I think once people start doing that, we'll see more change. But I also want to highlight not enough is being done, and everyone, is not only up to athletes. We all have to do more about it. And I think we can't stop thinking about this. We have to continue the conversation and continue acting upon the conversation as well. It's on mute.
I'm gonna put you on the spot here. So in Trinidad and Tobago, we have had an increase number of Venezuelan migrants, given the situation, the political turmoil that is happening in their home country. And like all migrants, they are not being treated well. And I have to be frank about it. What would be your advice, speaking to us, as regards to the Latin American community? Because at the end of the day, we speaking about racial inequality, but yet our neighbors having problems, they are coming home to us and we want to treat them like unequals.
I think one thing, and it's something I've noticed with immigration everywhere, we need to stop, or people need to stop, looking down on other people. I feel like there's this thing of like, they're not enough or they're less, and you need to respect them. You need to understand their culture, open up to them and give them a hand, and just stop thinking that they're poor or they can barely speak English or whatever it might be. You need to stop looking down at people. And that's one of the things that I felt like happened to me a lot when I was in the US. I felt like I was being looked down upon. I felt like people didn't trust my abilities to get good grades or to make a presentation or whatever that may be. And I think that's one of the main things that needs to happen. It happens with us. We have a lot of Dominican immigrants here, and I think we need to show more respect, hear them out, see what they feel, understand their problems. And I think once you do that, they're going to start feeling better, and you're going to notice that, like, we're all equals, and we shouldn't be, I'm just highlighting that we shouldn't be looking down on people. And these are people that have struggled. They're coming to your country for a reason. Some of them would love to stay in the country and they can't. So stop telling people to go back to your country, because it doesn't work like that. And we all deserve to have equal opportunities. That would be my main. And just make sure that everyone's getting equal opportunities as well, because that doesn't really happen, especially in sports. You think it does, but it doesn't. And more equal opportunities should come by.
It's very interesting you mentioned the last point, because I was going to ask you, how is it that we as an association can be able to do that? Because at the end of the day, we are not better than any organization. We just want to be able to lead in a positive light. But you did answer it, and I want to say thank you very much for doing such. And I'll definitely be reaching out to you to be able to see how best we can be able to incorporate our Latin American neighbors, because it is a difficult time for them, especially what's happening. To both of your ladies, I want to say thank you.
Jeffrey, one thing, I just have to make sure I shout out my friends and family in Trinidad and Tobago.
I wasn't going to finish with all that. As we are saying, you're rushing the brush here.
I couldn't see. I'm like 1 hour and 13 minutes. I don't know. He might cut this off soon. So, I had to do it.
Floor is yours.
Yes. I just want to say hello to all my Moore family and all of my friends and everyone in Trinidad. I have been watching a lot of CPL recently. I'm at home with my parents, and it has been really torturous to see all the sites and the ads and knowing that we're not there. We were supposed to have family reunion this year, but we did not, because COVID is a hater, as I have said. And I really look forward to seeing everybody soon. And if it's not in Tobago or at a family reunion event, then I certainly hope to see you in the next jump up, as it were. So I will find myself there for Carnival Stanton again. So.
And that's an invitation to you as well, Kio. Bring the family down to Carnival. We always say that the Brazilians speak of how great their Carnival are, but I'm challenging them to be able to come to Trinidad and Tobago and see if it could party with us and like us. Then you all can't say that you're the number one. So Kio, to you and your family, Nikki, to you and yours, wishing God's richest blessings on you all, and thank you very much. I really hope that when it is you're going to that locker room, that you all can reflect and say, yes, we did have a great talk. To Aiden, we hope that all is well with you and yours, and we still thank you for having us in your prayers and for being a part of this great talk. And we continue to push and keep our knees, our entire body on the neck of racism, so that we can be able to stamp it out, we can stop it. As we are doing right now in Futsal 868, our campaign is called It Ends With Me. So to all, we do wish you all a great and blessed week ahead. And thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
Once again, it's God's richest blessings to you and yours. Have a good afternoon, one and all.
Thank you. Thanks, Kio. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.